A lot of uncertainty around if certain posture exercises or recommendations work. Should you stretch this? Should you strengthen that to deal with forward head posture? If I have a round in my upper back, here's mobility exercises, here's strengthening, here's stretching exercises. Do they work? Anterior pelvic tilt, excessive arch in the lower back, stretches, strengthening, whatever. Is it even effective? Does it do anything? Is it worth spending time addressing it from a physical muscle perspective where you're trying to address the potentially weak muscles and the potentially tight muscles and do something to try and deal with the dysfunction you're having in that area leading to poor posture? And I don't know if any of you who are watching this have seen any of the content I've made on YouTube, but it's more popular. There's been more traction on Instagram Reels and TikTok. And any posture related video, there's always a lot of positive comments, but there's always a subset of people that come in and say that, this is complete BS, that there's no such thing as bad posture, muscle imbalances don't exist, the human body is adaptable and you can be healthy in any type of posture, no matter how it looks. And so forth, all things kind of in that range. And there's usually a lot of likes on those comments when they come in and say somebody comes in with the general view of like, okay, this is horse crap. And I take that stuff very seriously because ultimately my goal, like, people are going to troll. There's going to be trolls regardless. I'm okay with that. I'm not trying to address that and rectify the trolling situation and get people to not troll. There's always going to be trolls. But if this is valid at all, I want to address it and change my approach, change what I'm saying. I'm not, married to my opinion or my current take. And ultimately, if I have something that needs to expand, I need to expand my understanding, completely, potentially reshape my perspective and understanding of something like posture. I'm more than willing to do so, but I need to see some evidence. You need to be able to explain things in a logical, rational way. Anyways, the whole point of why I want to make this video is that if you've followed any of these things and you've seen the comments, to maybe shed some light on what science is saying around it. Let's try to refer to science. It's probably our most reliable source to determine what is actually concretely true or false. And the other thing I wanted to say is that I've tried responding to these people in a number of instances, and it always leads nowhere. And I'll approach, if you look at my video, the ultimate guide to anterior pelvic tilt, I think on Instagram is what the title is called. There's a comment in there, and I wrote a long response. The video about how to look more jacked by improving your posture, similar kind of thing. Engage with another individual, said, okay, let's see the evidence. Show me. I'm 100% willing to shift my perspective. What can you provide to me to shift my understanding? I kind of explain in detail how I'm thinking about it and what evidence I've seen and why I'm making these videos and why I believe that it is helping people and it is a good way to think about the problem. And it never leads to anything. I always walk away going, that didn't change my understanding, my thought process at all. I'm still thinking about it in a similar way, but I'm more than happy to shift. I really am. If you show me evidence and I have to rethink completely my understanding of the human body, then I'm more than willing to do so. But I wanted to, in this video, go over most of the science, or a good chunk of the science that I've exposed myself to since reading a lot of these comments. It made me dive into the research more thoroughly and try to find if there is evidence of what these people are saying. And the short version of it is no. If you don't want to listen to the whole discussion, but I'm going to go into more detail. I just went through Google Scholar, started looking up different things like effectiveness of posture exercises, looking into forward head posture, rounded upper back posture, excessive arch to the lower back, some of the more typical postures, and trying to look through all the different studies that took an approach of let's do some kind of program targeted at improving mobility, improving strength, reducing tightness, some of it aimed at pain. Now, there's a bit of a distinction between pain and dysfunction. So you could have maybe a little bit of a dysfunctional posture, but not necessarily have pain directly associated with where the postural dysfunction is. That's something that has kind of come up over and over again in the scientific literature, is that the link between pain and a postural dysfunction is a little murky. So I'd say that's one thing that I have learned or picked up from some of the rebuttals that I've seen on social media. But in none of my videos am I even mentioning pain. Is what you'll see. I'm saying that these postural dysfunctions, are probably overall not a good thing. And here's some simple ways to understand your anatomy. Start to understand the problem of what could be going on. It's a very complex issue, but here's what could be happening. Here's what you could start to do something to improve your posture. And anyway, so let's get into some of the studies that I looked at. In every case, there was positive results. So in any scientific study that I came across where they're doing some kind of program of stretches and strengthening or some kind of therapy, manual therapy, in every instance, there's some type of positive result. I think what's most important to look at would be the meta-analyses. I'm going to post the link to this in the description box on my link tree, so you can look at all the different studies that I went through. But the meta-analysis is probably the best way to do it. And what a meta-analysis is an analysis of all the related studies. So the first one I looked at was a meta-analysis of forward head posture. Here we go. It's a systematic review where they just look at all the different studies in that space addressing forward head posture. So if your head is kind of jutted forward some. And initially they found 3,333 quadruple 3 studies related to that. And I believe they trimmed it down to, and they're looking at things like bias, the methods of the study, the way the study's structured, how reliable is this study, what methods are being used, etc., to determine. It's a rigorous protocol to determine, is this a reliable study with a low degree of bias. And I believe they trimmed it down to about seven studies that were only randomized clinical trials, which is a highly regarded structure for study, where basically if you have an experimental group and a control group, so let's say you're addressing forward head posture and you and the people doing the study have decided that you're going to do 6 different exercises and 3 stretches, and you're going to get 20 people to do those and 20 people to do nothing, or some, depending how you set up the structure. As far as I understand it, randomized control trial means that, so you have those 40 people in total that you're randomly selecting to go into each group. There's no set of criteria where you split these people in here because of this or that. It's a complete randomization of who goes into the control, who goes into the experimental group. And it can get much more complicated. That's a simplified version of it. But what the meta-analysis found was that therapeutic exercises may result in large changes in CVA, which is just a measure of the craniovertical angle, and moderate improvement in neck pain, and participates with forward head posture. The precise nature of the relationship between forward head posture and musculoskeletal pain and improvements remains to be established. So they're saying the same thing that I've talked about, and that the relationship with pain and that is kind of hard to say. But overall, they found significant large changes in craniovertebral angle, which is decreasing the forward head posture. So overall, the findings suggest that therapeutic exercises may result in large changings in CVA. So that's the conclusion of the meta-analysis on forward head posture, which suggests, again, that it's not a concrete 100% thing. The human body is incredibly complex, but they're looking at over 3,000 studies, narrowing it down to the best 7, and overall their statement would be that it's probably going to lead to large changes in the improvement of head posture doing these therapeutic exercises, which is interesting. And then I looked at another meta-analysis of lower cross syndrome, also known as anterior pelvic tilt, where you've got that excessive arch in your lower back, your pelvis kind of tilts forward. And this is a little different. Again was like a couple thousand studies, 2,013 studies to start with, and they narrowed it down to 4 that they thought were the best. Again, trying to eliminate the ones that are going to have a high degree of bias, or the results aren't necessarily that impactful because of X, Y, Z reason. We don't like that you did this with the study. We don't like that you did that. This could lead to this bias, blah, blah, blah. These are the 4 best that we're going to take the most serious. Out of those 4, all of them showed positive result in a decrease in the angle of anterior pelvic tilt. Some of the methodologies, as I was looking through them, were still a little bit weird, but overall they did. One of the four had a very slight decrease, almost negligible amount. But what I thought was interesting about that study is that it was a prescribed exercise routine. So they're just telling people to do it. There was no supervision of them doing it. And over, I don't know what it was 8 weeks or something like that. You don't know, but I would speculate that the adherence was probably pretty low. I think any study you're going to do, and you're going to put people through a bunch of different exercises and stretches and all this stuff, and then just tell them to go do it for 8 weeks. How can you know? And I'm surprised that they included this as a study that they thought had a low degree of bias or that would be tangible result, because to me, the number one thing is to actually put them through all the exercise to make sure for sure it's being done. But overall, that they all had positive evidence, but the meta-analysis thought that this isn't substantial enough for us to determine and say that these therapeutic interventions or these kind of programs of addressing posture from a physical muscle and bone standpoint, stretches, strengthening, adjustments, whatever, is not substantial. And the main criticism is that the quality of evidence is weak, even though all of the evidence does show a positive relationship in that doing these programs in every study did lead to an improvement in posture. And overall, they conclude that there's a need for higher quality studies, specifically looking at lower cross syndrome, anterior pelvic tilt. And I agree. As I was looking separately for studies, I had a tough time finding really good high quality studies. Whereas looking at upper back posture, neck posture, there was a lot more good research examining that issue. So I agree with their analysis that there's a need for more, but I would say still that all of the evidence that I've seen shows a positive relationship. And I couldn't find a single study that concretely showed no relationship. And I'm sure they're out there, 100%. I'm sure that they exist. But overall, and then I looked at a bunch of individual studies, all similar things, where in every instance they found a substantial improvement in the posture from the type of exercise program that they were doing. So overall, there's room for critique. It's still an area that it's not 100% rock solid. You do this exercise, you do this stretch, it's going to directly improve your posture 100%. But I don't see any evidence that these programs don't work. There is evidence that there maybe is not a direct relationship between pain and certain postures, specifically in that area. In my opinion, I think that would be better to look at what happens to an individual's ability to move through normal ranges of motion if they exhibit a severe dysfunctional posture, like excessive anterior tilt, a really big round in the upper back, forward head posture. Are they still able to move their shoulders, their hips, and everything through proper ranges of motion and maintain stability through those joints? That's the big thing that I think is going to cause problems for you. If you have a significant, in my mind still, if you have a significant postural distortion, that there's some degree of muscle imbalance going on around that, and it's going to make it difficult to do movements, whether you're in the gym or whether you're just living your life in general, in a solid, healthy way. And I think another thing to note is that exhibiting some maybe not ideal posture is not the end of the world. Like it doesn't mean that you're automatically going to hurt yourself or that you automatically have a severe muscle imbalance that's going to lead to, then there's so much variation across the population. But when you sum everything up, and based on my experience and everything that I've seen working with people and then looking at the scientific evidence, everything generally points towards there are consequences to having these postures, that they do lead to issues, and doing something to address them is in your interest. And I think that a lot of people that really oppose this, I kind of agree with it in the sense that the human body isn't like a mechanical machine where it's like this part is like, this lever of the machine is like overstressed because this part is too long and we need to like adjust it by mechanically taking out a part and putting another part in. If you have this posture, stretch this, strengthen that, your body's a machine, it fixes itself. It's not quite like that. Like that's one extreme, but the other extreme is that no bad posture exists. Muscle imbalances don't exist. None of these things affect your ability to move properly. None of these things are related to pain at all. There's kind of two extremes. And I think some of the people, when they see my content, it comes across as being more on this end. And I understand some of their criticism, and I'll even align with it, and I'll say, yeah, it's tough in a 40-second video to get across that like the way I'm thinking about it is like for the average person, this is a way I can present the information to you to begin for you to understand what part of the problem might be. If you have this posture, if you have stiffness in this area, if you have a lack of mobility, whatever is going on, here's some of the anatomy of what could be going on, and here's some of the ways that you could address it. This muscle's probably weak. This muscle's probably tight. Whatever. What is the exact cause of it being weak? What is the exact? It's hard. That's where it gets much more complicated. A lot of these issues are very complicated. But if you want to give people something in the short time span world, like this video, for example, I'm rambling on, it's probably overall better information, but it's not going to have nearly the same amount of reach because it's not like heavy hitting, quick, impactful visuals. Pop, 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 pop. Here's the information condensed down to 30 seconds. Duh. Here's a way that you can start applying it practically. So I think it gets a little bit misinterpreted because of that. And the last thing I'd like to finish is that it made me really reflect a lot and think, okay, like what's going on? Like what am I, when I first see comments like that, I'm like, wait, what am I missing? Like how am I so completely off here that, somebody's like, I'm a physiotherapist and this is complete BS. And then like, that's the top comment. 100 people have chosen to like it. I'm like, I must be missing something, and every time I engage, it leads nowhere. And I end up a lot of times with the like physios or chiros, I explain in more detail, like they're picking out like a small element of it and like almost purposely misrepresenting it to say this is like slightly wrong because of this, that, the other. And then I'll respond in a comment and explain in more detail what I'm talking about. And then you'll usually agree more, like, oh, okay, I see what you're saying. And they come in really negative and aggressive. And then I explain and we engage a little bit. And then they go, oh, yeah. And then we realize our difference of how we look at the issue is like actually really small. Because I go about establishing, okay, what do we agree upon? What do we disagree? Where is the area of disagreement? Let's address some things and try to come to somewhat of a more, and it ends up going that way with those individuals. And then other people who are just kind of blatantly saying like, this is not how it works, blah, blah, blah. There's no such thing as bad. It never leads anywhere. Like I'm okay, show me evidence, explain to me your thinking, explain to me like how I'm thinking about it. It literally goes nowhere. So it's on one end, I want to take it seriously because if it's an opportunity to learn and expand my understanding and admit something that I've got wrong and improve it, I'm 100% willing to do that. My main goal is to put out content that I think is going to help people and is ultimately truthful. And if I'm putting something out that isn't, then that's serious to me because I want to rectify it. But coming in like that, it's never, up to this point, it's never led to a situation where somebody's really helped. And the situations where it does, it's like something small where they're like, well, I think that could actually maybe be because of this muscle versus this muscle. And they explain their thinking. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I can kind of see that. And like, it's just like little small things that are like slightly adjusted that could be this versus this. And that's the only main thing. And then that pain isn't necessarily related to postural dysfunction or movement dysfunction, but I've never even said anything about pain in my videos anyways. So, and the last thing that I would get to is that when I was thinking about this, I was like I try to be really empathetic and put myself in other people's shoes to try to understand where they're coming from, right? Because you can see from your perspective, like I'm putting myself out there with this content. I work really hard to put it out. Somebody leaves a comment, it's a top comment, bunch of likes, doesn't feel good, right? And it's like you'd want to just get emotional, upset, and be like, "Fuck these motherfuckers," like, But maybe there's a reason, and then try to look into it from a logical perspective, see if there's additional information. Okay, there isn't. Okay, well then why is this happening? And why is there a large contingent of people that are liking all these comments? Like, what's going on? Where's all this coming from? And maybe I'm wrong, but the main thing conclusion that I've come to at this point is it's a similar type of thing like fat shaming, where everybody wants to say, no, your body's fine the way it is, and kind of ignore the science and the evidence that it's not an attack on your self-worth to say, hey, you're overweight, you're out of shape, you should do something to get in shape if you want to be healthier. You're still a great person. I still value your value as a human is still at the same level as anyone else's, but overall, we still need to hold up these objectionable truths that fat, being overweight, is not good for your health. And that most people don't find it as physically attractive. But saying those things to somebody who's overweight is really hurtful, and it makes them feel, even if you do it in a respectful way, like the way I am, I'm sure that could offend some people and make themselves feel hurt. And if there's enough people that feel hurt, then they start to push back and against what the truth is. And you see this a lot in our society right now, where we're favoring the way that people feel about certain things over what the objectional truth is. And there's a balance. You want to make people, you don't want to make people feel like shit about themselves, but we can't abandon these truths. And the reason I'm talking about this is it's like really extreme with fat shaming, where like articles in magazines have gotten taken out because it was like, I remember this one is like how to lose like your like Christmas like extra fat or extra pound. I don't know what words they used. And so many people complained that it was fat shaming, so they took it out. And it was just a bunch of basic recommendations of like, I can't remember, like get out and walk and like drink more water and like all these things that are going to help people. But like, no, there's no, like, it's not bad for you to be fat because it makes me feel bad when you say that. And I can't help but think that at this point, based on my approach to it and trying to understand where this could be coming from, this is what I think it is. I think that there are certain people that see the video and it challenges them, and maybe they have that posture, maybe they have a limited mobility, and they, instead of consuming the information and trying to better themselves, they go, no, that makes me feel uncomfortable because it's challenging me, and they're weak enough to just say, hey, and just try to tear it down instead and say, like, there's no such thing as bad posture is one of the big claims, like, to me. And when that's said, I'll be okay, well, I get that some postural dysfunction can happen without leading directly to pain in that area. Some postural variability exists within the human population, and there are definitely individuals who maybe have a little bit of a posture distortion but still have pretty good mobility. Like, there is wiggle room. But then I'll ask, like, okay, well, what about if somebody has like severe like their body is like corkscrewed, no such thing as bad posture? That person's fine. They should go into the gym and squat. They should do all this regular lifting. It's not going to affect their stability with keeping their spine in a safe position. It's not going to affect their range of motion in the joints. It's not going to affect anything. Muscle imbalances don't exist. Bad posture doesn't exist. Like that, to me, the only way you can like think that is if it's motivated from the same position where you're going, well, like being like the same thing as being extremely overweight is there's nothing wrong with it because it makes me feel bad that you'd accuse me. It makes me feel bad that you'd accuse me of having bad posture. There's no such thing as bad posture. And I think you'd even see it if like somebody's like, I'm a physiotherapist, and people come into my clinic and they're like, I have, this is out of alignment, that is out of alignment, I need to address these things. I'll go have to reteach them. You don't have to address any of those things. So is that physiotherapist over time is just finding more success adhering to people and just placating to them and just saying, no, your body's actually fine the way it is. Let's not address the issues that, supposedly are going to cause problems. And over time, there's just more and more patients that like that and like hearing that, instead of somebody that comes in and, yo, motherfucker, like, your body's all snapped up and fucked up and it's partially your fault and you need to do something about it. People that are weak and don't want to improve themselves are just going to leave and go somewhere else. That's only going to attract people that are really interested in improving themselves and can take a critique of their ego and a critique of and can handle some negativity, even if it's going to better them in the long run. So it's crazy to me that like, that's where I'm at, where I think that's the most likely thing. And it just blows my mind that there's people out there that are that weak that would look at, I literally never would have thought that same kind of approach would look at that video and go, oh, this addresses what some of my inadequacies are, and that makes me feel shitty, and let's just push that no fucking posture is bad and muscle imbalance don't exist, and we don't need to do anything about our dysfunctional bodies, and let's just stay in them the way they are, and we're fine the way we are. Like, I feel so bad if I'm correct and that's the way people are thinking. Like, you're not going to go anywhere in life. That is such a miserable approach. I would say the same thing about anybody that would justify being significantly overweight. Again, it doesn't mean that you're a terrible person, you don't have self-worth, and all these other ways that society will like kind of judge you for that. And like, I would open my arms and say, hey, like, I would value you as a person if you treat me with respect. I don't give a shit if you're significantly overweight. I'm really into fitness. That's me. I'm still going to look at you just as like a person and base it off your character and how you treat me. But we can't abandon that it's unhealthy. Like, it's so clearly objectively unhealthy. And from what I've seen, all the evidence in my experience, it's so clearly problematic to have some of these postures and issues, especially if they're really severe. And to abandon that just to make everyone feel okay about their bodies is way worse. And it's indicative of where our society has been going lately, and that everything is about how people feel. And I understand that we want to be inclusive and progressive, and excluding people and negative emotions causes problems. And we don't just want to be completely discompassionate and unempathetic. But at the same time, like, how far do we want to bend the reality of what science says, of what all the evidence says, to placate just so people can feel okay about themselves and just continue to sit in misery and do nothing about their problems. So yeah, I thought it was an interesting experience that I've had, and I just wanted to share it with anybody who was, maybe seen my content and seen some of those comments. And this is what I'm trying to do to address them. And again, I would leave it with this, just saying like my goal is truth. Like I have no, I'm not going to prioritize being right over the truth. I'm more than happy to take an L. You show me significant evidence that in support of what you're saying, I'll take the L. 100%. If it logically makes sense and there's a bunch of evidence and you can show me something, then I'm more than happy to see that, because I'm a vessel for consuming the information and living through my experience, and then taking that knowledge, taking that evidence, and then trying to synthesize it in a way where then I can translate it into content that's going to help people to educate themselves, to influence their experience, whatever else. And I have no interest in manipulating it or putting it through a lens that creates distortions or causes it to be false or untrue or twisted in some way. I'm 0% just so I can be right or I can inflate my ego or whatever else. I don't give a fuck about that. That's so like, if you're gonna put out content that's wrong or twisted or geared in a certain way just to try to get more clout, to get more attention, and it's actually going to negatively impact people, what like in my eyes, like what the fuck is your point of your life? Like you're making the world worse just so you can feel a little bit better. Like how small are you as a person? So I mean that 100% from my heart. Like it's just stupid. Like you may as well just not be fucking doing anything. Like just shut the fuck up if that's how you're going to go about shit. Yeah, so I hope that maybe provides some insight into anybody who was maybe on the fence, maybe wondering, does any of this stuff work? And I'm going to make a short form video about the same topic. It's going to be a 41-second hitter of basically condensed of this, describing what I've seen with the studies, describing what the results are, describing what the pushback has been, trying to summarize the whole experience, just to continue to be transparent with people. Anybody that watches my content, I'm going to continue to be transparent, and it's not a goal to be right. It's a goal to find truth and try to use that information and knowledge and experience to try to help people. So thanks for watching. Hope you have a great day.